Karen yelled at my pregnant wife for sitting. She didn't know I was the police chief. It started with a scream. Not a scream of fear, not even pain. It was the kind of scream that carries the sharp pitch of entitlement, the sound of someone used to getting their way. No matter the cost. I was just pulling into our new driveway when I heard it. My wife, Leah, was 7 months pregnant. We just moved into Oakstone Crest 3 weeks ago, trying to find some peace before the baby came. It was supposed to be quiet, supposed to be safe. We paid above market price for the promise of a tight-knit, orderly neighborhood with classic values. The cul-de-sacs were trimmed, the bushes shaped into cubes, and the welcome packet included a 12-page community image and harmony guide. I should have known something was off when it was signed not by the HOA, but by someone named Tamara Vensley, who called herself head steward of standards. We'd unpacked maybe a dozen boxes. Leah needed air. She told me she was walking to the bench near the rose garden less than 200 feet from our front yard. That's where Karen found her. I didn't recognize her at first. I saw a woman in tennis shoes, pastel windbreaker, and big sunglasses leaning over Leah, waving her hands like she was swatting flies. You can't just sit here. That bench is HOA property. It's for community use, not lounging. Leah's hand was on her belly. Her back was arched slightly in pain. She looked up, panicked, trying to speak. I just needed to catch my breath. Excuses, Karen snapped. You people think you can just take advantage. She reached for the baby bag like she meant to toss it. That's when I ran. I didn't yell, not at first. I stepped in front of my wife and said in the calmest voice I could muster, "Back away from her. Now!" The woman turned to me, all fire and vinegar. "Oh, and who are you? Her boyfriend, her security." I pulled my badge from my back pocket. "No, ma'am, I'm her husband, and I'm also the chief of police for this city." Everything changed in that instant. Her face flushed red, twisted into something unnatural. You can't threaten me. I have authority. I run this neighborhood. I'll report both of you to the stewardship board." Leah began to cry softly. Her hands trembled as she reached for her scattered ultrasound photos. I looked down at the mess. Her water bottle had burst. Her prenatal meds were scattered like confetti across the bricks. The stroller wheel had snapped, and all of it, over a bench. 5 minutes later, we were surrounded. Neighbors had heard the yelling. Some recorded, some whispered, some looked away. Karen Tamara Vensley. I later learned paced like a cornered dog. She was loitering. The bench is part of the protected visual corridor of the East Park that's clearly outlined in the bylaws of the Faux Crest Heritage Addendum, which isn't legally binding. I said, "Because this HOA was dissolved in 2020, Tamara froze. That's when the lying started. It's not dissolved. We operate under legacy authority. Visual legacy, cultural legacy. You can't just have pregnant people hanging around here like stray cats." That was the moment someone live-streamed her face, her words, and my badge gleaming beside the woman she just tried to evict from a park bench. By 6 p.m. that same day, the clip had over 900,000 views. In it, Tamara Vensley, Oakstone Crest's self-proclaimed head steward of standards, shouted at my 7 months pregnant wife to vacate community property immediately. She called Leah's resting an aesthetic disturbance. She demanded that she learn her place and stop ruining the visual tone of the HOA. And then she looked into the camera and said, "They're just using the pregnancy card for attention. I've seen that before." That was all America needed. By midnight, it was on Twitter, then TikTok, then national news. Pregnant woman harassed over park bench. Her husband is the city's police chief. Karen of the HOA screams at expecting mother, faces furious backlash. But none of them, not even the journalists or my fellow officers, knew what I just discovered hours earlier when I started digging into Oakstone's HOA. We bought the house in good faith. The realtor swore there was light, voluntary HOA guidance, mostly to keep things tidy. What they didn't say was that the actual HOA had been dissolved due to a fraud lawsuit in 2020. But someone had stepped into that vacuum. Tamara. She had resurrected it like a ghost wearing a Sunday hat and called it the Creststone Preservation Guild, not a legal HOA, not a government entity, just a self-run neighborhood morality committee. Except she treated it like law, fake fines, public shaming campaigns. Community shame boards posted to Facebook with circled photos of out-of-code fences, aggressively parked vehicles, and I kid you not, non-decorative stroller placement. My wife, Leah, had landed in her crosshairs because she sat on a bench outside designated hours. There were no signs, no real bylaws, just a woman with a clipboard, a Facebook group, and a God complex. The next morning, I filed a formal complaint to the City Council and Zoning Commission. Then I paid a visit to her front door. Tamara opened it with a smirk. "Oh, you again? Coming to intimidate me now?" "No, what a read, ma'am," I said, handing her an envelope. "This is a cease and desist order. You are not legally allowed to impersonate an HOA officer or issue citations." She scoffed. "I am the steward." "No, you're a private citizen issuing fraudulent documents and abusing vulnerable people. You're just upset because your wife caused a scene." She was sitting on a bench. Tamara. "That bench is part of the visual legacy corridor." I stared. "You're quoting fake bylaws written by yourself in a Word document, stapled to flower photos, and mailed to residents as official mail. That's not law. That's delusion." Her lips curled. "You think the law protects people like her?" Oh, now I saw it, clear as day. Tamara didn't just hate disorder. She hated difference. And that's when I knew she wasn't acting alone. Because behind every paper tyrant is someone with a printer and a paycheck. I started digging into the guild. Its address was a P.O. box, but its funding. It came from something called the Old Oak Preservation Fund, registered to a man named Greg Whitman. I knew that name. He was the city zoning consultant who had fought against adding ramps to downtown sidewalks, claimed it disrupted historic charm. He'd also once tried to fine a cafe for placing a Black Lives Matter sign in their window. Greg funded Tamara enforced order, and the entire scheme operated under the radar of official oversight. Until now. By Thursday, I had 3 more complaints on my desk. A black teenager fined $50 for urban-styled music from his Bluetooth speaker. A disabled veteran cited for parking his modified van on the curb. A Muslim woman told to tone down her scarf colors to match neighborhood harmony. And all of them had one thing in common: Tamara's signature. That night, I called a town meeting. It wasn't official. It wasn't fancy. Just 40 folding chairs in the rec center. But it was full. I showed them everything. The fake citations, the hate disguised as order, the funding trail. Tamara wasn't just a nuisance. She was the spearhead of a bigger disease. A quiet woman in the front row, Marla, who lived near us, raised her hand. She yelled at my autistic son for spinning in the driveway. Another man added. She said my lawn sign was too political. It just said, "Welcome." Then the flood came. Voices, stories, pain. And just like that, the neighborhood that had been silent, divided, afraid was awake. I'd been in law enforcement for 21 years. I'd led hostage negotiations, handled riots, chased down drug traffickers with warrants a mile long, but I had never seen a neighborhood as quietly terrorized as Oakstone Crest. And the most shocking part, they didn't even realize it until it was too late, because the enemy didn't kick down doors or carry a weapon. She rang doorbells. She smiled in garden clubs. She spoke in passive-aggressive emails that started with my previous observation. Her name was Tamara Vensley, and she wasn't just the face of a fake HOA. She was the enforcer of a culture designed to shame and erase. After our impromptu community meeting, stories came in like a dam had cracked. One elderly man, Mr. Harmon, a retired firefighter, told me Tamara had demanded he remove his flagpole because it created vertical disruption. A Latina single mother said she was reported for visual clutter because her daughter drew chalk hearts on the driveway. And the most heartbreaking, a gay couple who had received a letter that read, "Your front porch decor promotes an inappropriate atmosphere. Children live here." It wasn't just HOA cosplay anymore. It was systemic harassment. And now I had enough to act. But before I did, something strange happened. Tamara vanished. 3 days, no walks, no flyers, no angry voicemails. Her car was still there. Her porch light stayed on at night. It was too quiet. Then on Monday, a courier showed up at City Hall with a folder addressed to me. Inside, a formal reinstatement petition to recognize the Crestone Preservation Guild as a civic heritage authority. A list of 29 official signatures of neighborhood support. A CD-ROM labeled Visual Case Files Aesthetic Violations 2021-2024. It was a last-ditch power move. If she couldn't control through fear, she'd try legality. But she made one mistake. I checked the signatures. 13 of them were dead. 4 had moved out years ago. 1 belonged to a man in a memory care home who hadn't signed anything since 2016. She was forging names. And that was it. That was all I needed. We served her with a formal investigation notice, not just from the city attorney's office, but from the state's Office of Consumer Protection and Housing Equity, because her guild had taken money, donations, fines, maintenance surcharges, over $76,000 in the last 3 years. None of it reported, none of it legal. But while the law turned its gears slowly, I reached out to someone who didn't the media. I spoke anonymously to a local paper first, then NPR called, then the Washington Post. And when they found out that the man funding Tamara Greg Whitman had ties to multiple visual harmony funds in 6 other neighborhoods, the fake HOA ring started to unravel. Tamara wasn't a rogue actor. She was a node in a web of HOA-styled enforcement groups using aesthetics and tradition to push out anyone they deemed unfit for the image. Non-white, disabled, queer, foreign-born. It wasn't code enforcement. It was social cleansing camouflaged as community pride. We'd found the rot. Now we had to burn it out legally, publicly, permanently. I called another town meeting, but this time, it wasn't to collect stories. It was to take a vote. We brought a motion to ban any non-governmental organization from acting in a regulatory capacity within Oakstone's borders. We established a resident protections committee elected, diverse, and bound by public transparency laws. And we announced a full refund initiative for anyone fined, shamed, or otherwise harassed under Tamara's guild. The crowd stood to their feet. Applause. Some tears. One fist pump from a teenager in the back wearing a pride bracelet. But then came the biggest surprise of all. Leah stood up. My wife. The woman who'd been yelled at, humiliated, shaken. And she said this: I don't want our daughter to be born into a neighborhood that fears rocking the boat. I want her to see that when injustice rises, even on the quietest street, people stood up and pushed back. We voted. Unanimous. Oakstone was done being polite to tyranny. Tamara Vensley didn't come to the final vote. She didn't answer her door, didn't return certified letters. And yet, that didn't stop her world from caving in. By the time our ordinance banning non-governmental rule enforcement passed, local media had already started circling her house like vultures over a rotting carcass. Then came the lawsuit, filed by a coalition of 17 residents, some elderly, some disabled, some parents, some queer. It named Tamara Vensley and Greg Whitman as co-defendants in a racketeering scheme that weaponized non-binding community values to financially exploit and emotionally target protected groups. And when it hit the news cycle, everything exploded. Cable news ran the clip on repeat. Tamara standing over my crying wife, wagging a finger, shouting, "You can't just sit here, Leah," clutching her pregnant belly. Me stepping forward. I'm her husband, and I'm also the city's police chief. That one sentence became a battle cry. Memes, hashtags, t-shirts. "You can sit here" trended nationwide. People posted photos of their pregnant wives sitting on park benches. Elderly folks in wheelchairs posed proudly beside their mailboxes. Even celebrities joined in. One actress posted from her hospital bed. Sitting isn't a crime. Karen. It became bigger than Tamara. It became a symbol. of every quiet injustice, of every fake authority figure who'd ever claimed power through paperwork and arrogance, of every person who was ever told to know their place. And while the world mocked her, the state got serious, because what started as petty harassment was now criminal. Forgery, fraud, tax evasion, hate crimes under color of private enforcement. Greg Whitman was subpoenaed and rolled over within a week. He gave up everything: documents, spreadsheets, audio recordings. Turns out, Tamara wasn't just writing citations. She'd kept dossiers, files on over 70 residents, what time they left for work, how often their kids visited, what color clothes they wore on community days, even pictures from security cams, some not her own. She called it behavioral profiling for community standards. She'd emailed Greg weekly. They called their targets anomalies, and in one now infamous document, she referred to Leah, my pregnant wife, as a potential image disruptor due to obvious urban background and obstinate sidewalk presence. It was racism. It was classism. It was cruelty. Typed in Times New Roman and hidden in manila folders. She was arrested quietly. No sirens. No cuffs in public. But the press caught the photo, her looking through the back window of the cruiser, still in that floral windbreaker, lips tight like she was sucking on a lemon. That photo made the front page of the New York Times under the headline, "From Steward to Suspect: The Rise and Fall of a Suburban Tyrant for Oakstone." It was both a relief and a reckoning. Her guild was dismantled. A court-ordered restitution fund was set up. All of her prior citations were declared void, and city contractors were hired to repaint curbs, fix damage, and install new benches, this time with plaques that read, "This bench welcomes all." But victory doesn't erase scars. Some neighbors still jump at every envelope on their door. A few are still scared to speak too loud at the mailbox. And Leah, she has good days, but the trauma lingers. One afternoon, she stood on our porch staring at the bench where it all happened. "Our daughter kicked inside her," Leah whispered. "She'll never have to wonder if she's allowed to take up space." And I swore silently I'd protect that truth with everything I had. The baby came early. Leah went into labor 2 weeks after Tamara's arrest. It was sudden, fierce, and terrifying, the kind of pain no man can prepare for, and no woman should have to endure under stress. We rushed to the hospital just after midnight. I held her hand the whole way. When our daughter, Naomi Grace Hale, let out her first cry at 3:47 a.m., the nurses smiled and said, "She's got lungs like her dad." But all I could think about was the first place I'd take her when we came home. That bench. When we returned from the hospital, Oakstone wasn't the same place we'd left. There were more people waving than ever before. More conversations between neighbors who once kept to themselves. Someone brought over baked ziti. Another left a bouquet with a note. "We see you. We're glad you stayed." That bench had been rebuilt, reinforced, repainted. It was now a permanent installation, gifted by the city, but more importantly, a plaque had been added, etched in bronze, dedicated to Leah Hale and to every woman ever told to move, hush, or sit elsewhere. You belong. I broke down when I saw it. I didn't cry when I buried partners. I didn't cry in courtrooms or crime scenes, or even when I took my oath. But I cried for that, for my wife, for Naomi, for every neighbor who stayed silent until they couldn't anymore. Across the country, people kept talking. Oakstone became a case study. Civil rights groups used the footage to push for stricter oversight on community enforcement. A new bill, the Residential Equity and Accountability Law, REAL, passed in 3 states. It banned the operation of any non-governmental regulatory body impersonating legal authority without clear public consent and legal charter. They called it Tamara's Law in the press. She appealed, of course, claimed she was misunderstood, claimed it was about order. But even her lawyer looked uncomfortable saying it out loud. She was found guilty of multiple charges: harassment, fraud, and unlawful impersonation of public authority. She was sentenced to 11 months house arrest and 3 years probation. Ironically, The court forbade her from running or participating in any neighborhood committee during that time. When the sentence was read, someone in the back of the courtroom clapped just once. That was enough. Leah started volunteering with the city's new resident advocacy board. She meets with other parents, helps review public access complaints, and pushes for changes that include, not exclude. Sometimes I watch her from the window when she walks Naomi to that bench. She sits, reads, smiles. No one dares say a word. Not anymore. They say justice takes time, that it bends slowly toward righteousness. But in Oakstone, justice didn't bend. It came like a breaking wave, sudden, fierce, and absolutely necessary, all because one woman refused to stand and a community finally refused to look away. What would you have done if you saw someone harassing a pregnant woman for simply sitting? Have you ever witnessed someone misusing fake authority to shame or control others? Share your thoughts below. Let's talk about boundaries, justice, and what we all deserve in the places we call home.